is on my side.
Deathloop is a time-looping FPS that features two rival assassins on a mission to do whatever it takes to eliminate each other, and good news, now PlayStation Plus Extra and Premium members can play Deathloop as part of the PlayStation Plus game catalogue, with hundreds of other games including blockbusters like Demon's Souls, Ghost of Tsushima and loads more of your favourites. So to celebrate, we're diving back into Deathloop to answer a crucial question. Is Deathloop still a masterpiece? What do we think of Deathloop today, a year after we first played it, and is now the time for players new to Deathloop to try it out for themselves? To answer that question, we're going to compare notes on Deathloop's gameplay and story. Don't worry, we dodge all the major story spoilers, discuss our time with the game, compare our experiences, and even hear from the IGN audience about some of their favourite features. Welcome to playIGN. It's like a book club, but miles better, because we've made it all about video games. It's as simple as that. On hand to share his in-depth knowledge is IGN UK news and features editor, Mr. Matt Purslow, who rated it a masterpiece of a game, declaring it like no other in his review. Matt, you've blasted through pretty much every FPS going. What made this one so special?
Well, like you say, it's that idea of it's like no other. It's a game that's made up of so many fascinating components that kind of come together in a way that should be really, really complicated, but is actually incredibly simple to play. And I think it's that simplicity and the way that it funnels complexity into just an easy shooter is what makes it such a joy to play.
Joining Matt is former IGN host Alicia Judge. Your Deathloop experience is a little bit newer.
Yeah, completely. I mean, I had an experience that I think a lot of people had when the game first came out, of they played a few hours and then bounced off it. And then coming back into it to play it for our discussion today, like when you mainline that game, it's incredibly satisfying because you get that power fantasy element quite quickly, of like that progression of getting stronger. But God, there's so much FOMO.
It's such a rich world, isn't it?
So many little side bits and noodly things to discover. So yeah, it's an incredibly complicated game, and yet it has that simplicity that Matt was talking about.
So first things first, what is Deathloop?
Well, Deathloop is a first-person shooter in which you play as this dude called Colt. And Colt is on this island called Black Reef, and he has realised that he's stuck in a time loop. His day is the same every day, and he's just got to break this goddamn loop. Now the problem is, there is another assassin on the island called Julianna who doesn't want him to break the loop. And so effectively their stories collide together as one person definitely wants to break it and the other person wants it to carry on indefinitely. So that's kind of the story, but it's how then the game uses that time loop as its kind of big mechanics. So the day is constantly repeating. You're going essentially through the same day over and over, seeing the same things happen, but learning how you can make things happen differently by moving pieces around for what the developers call a murder puzzle.
Because a critical thing is that both Julianna and Colt are the only people who can remember the previous days and retain memories. In fact, then as you play the game, you're also able to retain weapons and items and abilities. So a big part of this game is about learning, gaining knowledge, learning the patterns of the island until you get to this perfect day where you're godlike, you're storming through it, you've got all your weapons and abilities, you know exactly where everyone's going to be, and you're just like this murder machine.
Who's going to like this game?
I think anyone who's a fan of time loop games, but I mean, to better define that particular genre, Mark Brown from Game Maker's Toolkit called them clockwork games, this idea of working within a system, an established sort of order and pattern of events. You learn that pattern of events, you become super powerful, etc., etc. And there's a game called Sexy Brutale, which I think anyone who loves that will really enjoy this, because whereas Sexy Brutale was about trying to prevent a murder, you're kind of like the Julianna in that particular game. Here it's all about, you know, creating the perfect murder and pulling it all off.
And it's hard, it's an FPS, so it's not just for people that love that kind of time. You know, if you play something like Outer Wilds, you probably find the concept interesting, but also if you've just played a lot of good story-based shooters, if you like your Wolfensteins, you know, maybe even if you've liked Call of Duty and are looking for something that's a little bit more cerebral than those sort of things, it's a really good feeling shooter. I just think like this is probably the next level of that sort of campaign-driven shooter.
What exactly is the time loop itself? How often does it happen? How long does it last for?
So it's unusual because a lot of kind of time loop games, right, are on like maybe they say like 24 hours is represented by 24 minutes, right?
Yeah,
and
okay, yeah.
This game doesn't do this. Like the kind of loop is one single day that goes through 4 different time periods, and you start in the morning, go to noon, afternoon, and then night.
Right.
And you kind of decide how long you want to spend in those to fulfill the objectives that you've got there. And you do that by moving across the island, which is also made up of 4 different locations. And you can see where the complexities come. That means that there are effectively 4 different versions of each map. There's a morning, a noon, an afternoon, and a night. Yeah. And that creates all sorts of different things are happening at different times in different areas of the island, right? And it's working out how you navigate all of that leads you to kind of like the clues that fit together this murder puzzle.
And I think this is the really fun thing about Deathloop, and actually just time loop games in general. We love a time loop in storytelling, don't we? Like, you see it all the time in cinema, in books, but there's something about a video game, the fact that you can go and push your nose up into the very brickwork of this world and see how it operates at different areas, the secrets that you can uncover. Like, Deathloop does that so well, like the people who are digging into the wall in the morning, and then you come back later and you see what they've uncovered, and it's just sort of that exploration is so satisfying.
Yeah, and it's very open-ended. I found kind of like someone will explain via a note saying, look, Dave, you need to fix this thing, so I'm going to leave the garage door open at midday. And then I'm like, right, I've got to remember that's open at midday. Then I get distracted by something else, and then I see the garage door open, and I'm like, I should have remembered that. Why didn't I write that down? And it's kind of like, it's so open-ended. It's like Photoshop. It's this blank canvas that you start with, and until you know how you're going to get to where you want to be, you're never going to get there. But while you're doing it, it's so sumptuous.
Absolutely.
Are you stealth, or are you absolute brute force, kill everything that moves, or would you rather kind of like walk around the periphery of any given situation?
This is a dream. I'm going to guess that you're stealth.
Yeah, how did you know?
Yeah, you just strike me as a stealth man, considered.
Well, kind of like, it's that heritage, right, from Dishonored. It's got plenty of kind of like, the levels are designed to be made the most of in stealth. But I think the beautiful thing about Deathloop is because you are on a loop, and you can come back so many times, and you can play the same area so many times over. You get to choose, is this the time that I'm going to go, I'm absolutely going to lose my patience with everything, or I'm just going to pull out this peppermill big machine gun that feels like it should be mounted on the side of a fighter plane and just mow everything down.
With those adaptive triggers as well, you're like, oh, come on!
Oh, it feels so good, doesn't it?
Yeah, the muscles on your index by the end of this game.
It's the only working out I do these days, to be quite frank. What about you, Alicia?
See, I would always go into a situation wanting to stealth it, and then sometimes it would go out of control. But my
oh no, I dropped a grenade.
Oh no! Oh, you joke. That happened so many times. I thought I was using the hacker-majig and then throwing a grenade.
And that's the thing. What that I liked about Deathloop is that when you kind of make that snap decision to sort of go, I need to just. I can't get through this moment by being stealthy. I'm just going to mow people down. You never feel like you're being punished as much.
And this is a really key difference, I think, between Deathloop and some of Arcane's previous games like Dishonored, because Dishonored very much punished you when you took the lethal route. It tied its gameplay system to this morality mechanic, and that actually locked you out of some of the more fun powers.
Exactly, yeah.
Just such a shame. But then I think in the Dishonored DLC, Death of the Outsider, they got rid of that morality mechanic, and it's like, it's funny, each Arcane game that releases, you see them perfecting this particular brand of gameplay that they've become known for. There's lessons from Prey in here, and it's really lovely to see them honing their craft.
You talked about powers there, Alicia. What was your favourite slab? They call them slabs in this game.
They do, yeah. It has to be Shift for me. It's basically Blink from the Dishonored games, but it opens up. It makes the game so much more vertical, and that idea about being this zippy, godlike assassin.
Yeah.
I mean, you can pull off some incredible moves, and if you combine that with Nexus, I loved Nexus. Zipped away, chained people together, and just went one bullet shot.
Yeah.
Great, like you've cleared out a room.
I like the fact that you could swap positions with any of the characters when the slabs got a bit more powerful, and. My favourite trick was putting a mine down, swapping position with the baddie, and then he just instantly just swaps position with me, blows up, obviously.
Genius.
Trip mine. It's just like, it's things like that that make you go, I'm very clever indeed. I am a god.
I've got a soft spot for Carnesis.
Right, okay.
In the kind of like, it's the ultimate version of force push, right? But you get to pick people up, you get to slam them down, and kind of like you mix that with kind of like your weapon choices, and even kind of like the trinkets that make you yourself more powerful. Finding that kind of one where it's like, okay, I'm gonna use this thing and I'm gonna force push everybody around the room and slam them into walls. But I know I'm eventually going to run out of like the juice for that, but I'm going to use a trinket that means that I'm now going to sacrifice my health to carry on doing that, and you just end up with a room that is just an absolute like body pile of broken corpses.
Well, we actually asked our IGN Twitter followers which was their favourite slab, and here's what they thought. I mean, it was pretty much 46.5% rather, went for Shift, a very, very popular one. Least popular in our little poll was Kinesis with 11. Ether was up there as well, and Nexus with roughly quarter of the vote.
Look at you, hipster.
You've probably not heard of this slab yet, so with the Julianna invasions, do you want to sort of explain what a Julianna invasion is? Because that's the part of the game we've probably not explained properly.
So basically, Julianna is this other assassin, right? So you're the main assassin of the duo, and Julianna is your rival. She's constantly part of the story. She's always talking to you, pretty much hounding you throughout the game, right? And not only does she hound you through your radio, she will eventually turn up in game. A bit like how, I suppose, like the big sisters in BioShock 2 used to just appear. And but the special thing about it is if you're online and you've let the game do this, that Julianna is controlled by another character, by another player, should I say, like an actual real-life person has invaded you. Basically, it's the Dark Souls invasion system, right? But for Deathloop.
Is the phrase Julianna is on the hunt the most chilling sound in the English language? Because I get very stressed out when I hear about it.
Yeah, it's awful. Like, stomach turns to ice. You're like, here I am, on my loopy day, isn't it great? And then suddenly, traps are there in a place that you totally thought was safe. And I think one of the criticisms of Deathloop, some people have found, is that, you know, by your 14th hour in the game, you are so used to this time loop, you know every single corner of it, that actually it can get a bit stale and samey.
Right.
So Julianna, if you're playing online, she's really good at shaking that up, because suddenly the runs in the areas that you thought you could get through, you really can't, because she's there waiting with her sniper.
She's the unpredictable wrench in the predictable clockwork, right? Like she's the one that kind of, when you know the game so well and you think you know exactly every path you need to do, she's the one that creates the element that's so surprising.
So probably the star of the whole show is the actual game maps themselves, you know, the 4 districts. Which of Black Reef's 4 districts is your favourite? That's the question we asked on the IGN Twitter page. And Updam, 46%. The complex came in second highest at 19.3, Carl's Bay, and last Fristad Rock. But Updam is a piece of art, isn't it? It's a work of art, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's got the life that Dunwall had from Dishonored, right? It feels like you can tell there's history in every wall that you go. You can see that this place used to be kind of like a fishing district, and these were all the houses that the fishermen lived in. But now it's been taken over by this mad group of what are effectively cultists obsessed with living forever.
Those kind of old school kind of like, what do you call them, Victorian kind of buildings, and then just slapped with this horrible matte paint all over it and stuff. And you can still see the brush strokes where they've kind of gone over it. And these kind of bolted on 1970s, sort of 60s, 70s kind of like sort of cabins and stuff on the side. It's amazing.
And these glimpses that you get in the storytelling of the environment into who these people are who live there. The fact that there's no real food, there's just these candy machines, because of course, if it just loops every day, they can just live eternity,
what they want,
candy baby. Like, it's so fun, this rich sort of town that they've created.
Oh, just whacking those candy machines with a knife, just until, how many balls are coming out of these things? It's incredible.
But isn't the fact that the people are stupid enough that when they run through, they can trip on the candy and they knock themselves over? It's got like that sense
Tom
of
and Jerry moment.
Yeah, like real good. Like for a game that, you know, has a certain serious element to it, it's so funny, and sort of the world building brings brings that through with it. The fact that it is like this dour world that's been covered in mad preparation for a party, basically, particularly in Updam, that is leading every part of the day leads up to this massive kind of party and festival they have at the end of the day. And it has got a good sense of humour in watching people prepare for that and just basically being idiots, because there's nothing to stop them from being idiots.
Yeah, and what I like about the world is like that everything's deliberately placed. It's a classic. Arcane have got such a great reputation of it's a Western studio that doesn't take you for a fool, and it will allow you to do whatever you want, really. And they don't just put like an old oil can somewhere or a a crate that you never see in real life, a wooden crate in real life. Everything's deliberate. Everything looks like it's been lived in. Everything looks like it's there for a reason. So clearly Deathloop has a lot going for it. Matt, your favourite moment in the game?
So I've actually platinumed Deathloop.
Get out. Get out, fancy pants.
But one of the trophies is to do that final party and just go in, kill the 3 targets, and get out.
And then get out.
Never seen, don't kill anybody else. And oh boy, did that take me quite a few attempts. And finally getting there and walking out, and the trophy will only ping when you're actually out the map.
Right.
So the breath, like holding my breath as I open that final door, and it's like, is it gonna pop? Then you get the ding, and I was like,
oh,
there
wow.
we go, I'm in.
That must have been a real serotonin cartwheel.
Oh, absolutely.
So good.
Fantastic.
I love that. Yeah, the party was such an incredible area, but I think one of my favourite areas and my favourite moments was definitely Charlie's game within a game. I just think it was so special because, again, it comes back to this irreverent idea of Deathloop, and I love that meta layer of watching Arcane basically take the mick of themselves as game developers, like through Charlie's character and like his approaches to game design, the fact that he's won multiple Game of the Year awards and then has just become this sort of mad game developer with a bit of an ego, and like, I don't know.
We've seen it happen.
It was so fun. It was such a joy to explore.
I think probably my favourite moment is when you are in the library and you are forced to pick up this little thing called a grunt, and it's basically a sort of talking voice figurine sort of thing, and Alexis just will not stop talking. He's left you this big long message, and every time he talks, and the message is endless, it keeps attracting attention towards you and stuff, and so Curtis just goes, shut up, just shut up, and then he tries to put it down, and every time he picks it up and starts talking again. It's so good, and you can't shoot it will not die. It's brilliant.
It's like the worst escort mission. People normally hate escort missions in games. That's the mother of them all.
So many people will be coming to Deathloop for the first time, and with such an open-ended game and with such a rich world, any tips?
Honestly, I would say for new players, this is not even a gameplay tip, it would just be like, stick at it. There are so many systems that you're learning that it can be really overwhelming, like going into the world, and actually there's a satisfaction if you stick at it, and there's the aha moments as everything clicks, and just sort of get through those first 3 hours, it becomes a really rewarding experience.
I would say like look up and down, and I know that sounds like a fairly obvious thing, but kind of in an Arcane game, there are so many hidden things, be that kind of like event on the floor that leads to a completely different area that's going to be to your benefit, or there's an area that you can hide in the rafters so you can watch enemies and learn how to kind of like strike and pounce. And it's that kind of like, nowhere is just a simple corridor. Everything has something special, and it's just that look up, look down, absorb what's around you. And it's the environment will give you a tactic. It's not just about what guns you've got, what information you've got. Like, the environment will provide what you need.
The game will be very happy to kill you if you've gone wrong. If you've done something that they don't want to do, so just push at those kind of barriers a little bit and just see where you end up. I agree. It's such a great world. So I guess it's time to ask the question: a year on, is Deathloop still a masterpiece?
For sure. It's definitely, if you're looking for an interesting approach to time loop mechanics within video games, you've got to play Deathloop for the way that it plays, particularly with Julianna and Colt's relationship, the player invasion. Like, that's so interesting, that dynamic.
I mean, it's only a year on, right? So my opinion hasn't changed much. I think it's an absolutely wonderful piece of game design. Every system in that game links to another one. The way that kind of time influences space, space influences kind of the way that you work to get your tactics out. Everything fits together in a way that's just beautifully clockwork. And I just think it's one of the best things that Arcane's ever made.
There you have it, Deathloop, a certified masterpiece and an unmissable experience. Don't forget that PlayStation Plus Extra and Premium members can now play Deathloop via the PlayStation Plus game catalogue. There's never been a better time to give it a go. Once you've wrapped up your perfect loop, remember there's also hundreds of other current and classic games available there for you to play today. Check out PlayStation.com/plus to see the options for yourself, and for more on time looping shooters, among other things, stick with IGN.